Welcome to Nerds at Church, a podcast about nerdery and the Bible. I'm Pastor Kay, and I use pronouns like she and her.
And I'm Pastor Emily, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs.
And my name is Polly Festa, and I cut the difference. My pronouns are she and they.
In this episode, we'll discuss the fourth Sunday of Easter, also known as Good Shepherd Sunday, which this year falls on May 8th.
Check out the episode description for links to the Bible passages and other references we make in this episode.
For our deep dive into shepherding this Good Shepherd Sunday, we are super excited to have with us our guest, Polly Festa, who is the manager of Marushka Farms, the largest flock of Rohloff sheep in the U.S. When she is not busy tending the flock, they enjoy knitting and other fiber arts. They also enjoy studying church history and theology in her free time. Welcome, Polly.
We are so glad to have you with us.
I am so happy to be here.
I love the name Marushka, and it makes me think that it's Slovak, or at least in the Slavic language family.
It is from the Slavic family. It's Ukrainian, actually. My boss's grandfather immigrated from the Ukraine and worked hard in the coal mines here in Pennsylvania and was able to buy a farm and bring relatives over and all that. But Marushka means Little Mary, Little Marie, and that's what he called Marie. So she named her farm after her grandpa.
Aw.
Aw, that's lovely.
And then I also keep my own flock here that has its own name. My flock is Heididdle Homestead, and it also has a grandparent connection. Heididdle Farm was my grandma's farm, and my grandma helped raise me. So
that's fantastic. That's
sweet.
A beautiful, I think in the midst of my experience in the Midwest was a lot of farms and agriculture were big endeavors, and to have like these real family connections is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Farming is always a family thing, even when they're big looking farms. Usually it's one family. It might be many generations, but it's one family.
Yeah. So how did you get into shepherding?
I have always loved sheep. Even though I grew up on a dairy farm, I have been in love with sheep from a very young age. There's a story of me in the stroller going down the sheep barn at a fair, trying to figure out what these strange animals are. And I went, cow? No. Doggy? No. This went on for a while and finally decided, cow doggy. And I would share my bottle with the bottle lambs at the fair.
Oh.
I would give them some, and I would drink some, and give them some. There's stories of me and my little chair in the middle of the sheep ring because I wanted to see what was going on. If I ran away from our cows at the fairs, I was in the sheep barn.
It's good to have a reliable place to find you.
Yeah.
Like, you can find Jesus in the temple, you can find Polly at the sheep.
So basically my two favorite animals in the world ended up being cows and sheep.
Excellent.
That's fantastic.
So you said that you have your own flock. What breeds of sheep do you raise?
So I also raise the Rohloff sheep, and the other name that Rohloffs are called is CVM, which stands for California Variegated Mutant.
Not like the X-Men, I presume.
Well, they thought it was, actually.
Okay.
It was a white sheep can carry color patterns underneath, and the patterns popped up, and they thought it was a mutated gene that caused the color, not how color patterns actually work.
Sure.
So, they didn't understand these things in the 1950s as well as we do today.
Right.
And then my boss did have a few Icelandics when she first started, but we have very few of them left. Mardi Gras is our only purebred one, and she takes herself wherever on the farm she wants to be. There is no fencing Mardi Gras in.
Okay.
Nice.
So what are Rohloff sheep like? I assume that the breed has characteristics or personality to them?
They are utter sweethearts. They are very much in your pocket sheep, which is both good and bad.
Sure. I can see that.
Bindy's a little too helpful anytime I open the door from where we keep our lambing pens to the main area. She wants to come in and help herself to different things, which is very annoying.
Sure.
But they're a very sweet temperamented breed. Their wool is incredibly fine. It's like merino. It's the stuff you want right next to
Ooh.
your skin.
Oh, wonderful.
It's just the merino breed did a better job at advertising.
Sure. So
Oh.
the mental image I'm getting, there's a video that wandered around the internet a few years back of a woman who was a keeper for a panda enclosure at a zoo, and she gets into the panda enclosure, and there are three little baby pandas that like follow her around as she's trying to do her job and are constantly getting in her way. And it's hilariously adorable, but also like it must have been incredibly irritating for her. And
Yeah,
that's
but
kind of the mental thought I'm getting from this.
multiply that
Okay.
by a lot. We have
Sure.
about 500 sheep on our farm.
Oh, goodness.
That's
Oh,
because of lambing, so.
Sure.
wow. Why Rommel Bear?
Because they're a fine wool breed, they're very marketable to hand spinners.
Oh, sure.
Mm,
And I knew Marie from the Livestock Conservancy. We had met there at one of the conferences years ago, so I knew a good breeder. And my
mhm.
sister was helping me get into the flock to start my flock when we started. So
Sure.
it was a breed she really wanted to play with. So in the breed I really preferred more at the time was not a fine wool breed.
Okay.
So, what are your like daily chores to care for the sheep? Do you deal with medical issues and lambing stuff? You mentioned lambing, so there's something.
So I do the day-to-day care, which would be get up, feed. We're getting into pasture season, so rotating pastures, building the temporary fences that divide our larger pastures. Yes, I do the medical stuff that doesn't require a veterinary license,
Sure.
but I also work very closely with our veterinarian. And I am the sheep midwife extraordinaire.
Okay.
Ooh, say more.
So if a ewe is having trouble, which most part our breed does not have problems when they are lambing, but when they do, someone needs to assist, which does
Sure.
require reaching your arm up a sheep's private
Sure.
business. And so I put on the glove, put on the lube, and untangle the lambs.
Sure.
Gotcha.
Sometimes you have two lambs trying to come out at the same time.
Mm.
Sometimes it's three lambs at the same time.
Yikes.
Sometimes the head's twisted back, and I'm just really good at solving that puzzle.
Sight unseen,
It.
too.
I was gonna
Yes,
say it kind of sounds like you're
it's all
trying to
by feel.
untie a knot in the dark. Yeah.
Yep.
A slippery knot in the dark.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
bet. Gracious.
Oh.
Mm.
Do your sheep usually have multiple? Do they usually give birth to multiples?
Yes, twins on
Oh.
average, though our first time mamas and our really old mamas will sometimes have singles.
Okay.
And then
Sure.
we have some occurrence of triplets. There are other breeders who will have quads. But there
Wow.
are other breeds of sheep, like your East Frisian and your Romanoffs, that litter, literally. They will have 5 or 6 lambs at once.
Yikes.
Wow.
And those are usually breeds bred for milk production, not just meat and wool.
Sure.
Gotcha.
The more babies you have, the more milk you produce.
Yep.
Right.
Ideally, we want twins, one for each teat.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So where does the fleece from your sheep go?
So we niche market our wool. We don't enter it into a general wool pool, which is how a lot of sheep farmers sell their wool.
Okay.
So we have different levels of how we sell it. We will sell it raw fleeces directly to hand spinners, either at fiber shows like Maryland Sheep and Wool, which is coming up, or the New York State Sheep and Wool Festival. We also will send it off to be processed into roving or
Cool.
yarn, and we sell it that way on our website. And then I personally actually sell to another breeder who doesn't have enough sheep to process her wool into what she needs it processed into, because I only have 20 sheep, so
Sure.
I only do wool runs every 3 or 4 years myself.
Okay.
Sure.
So, what is a wool run?
So that's what we call sending it off to be processed into
Okay.
yarn or roving or felt
Okay.
or.
Nice. My friend Lee in Utah, when I was in Utah, got me. They do a lot of like spinning and fiber art stuff, and so they like got me into spinning. So I have like some wool that I've spun and some that still needs to be spun, and a spinner. It's a really it's a really like meditative.
Yeah.
Knitting to me is active meditation
Mm-hmm.
because
Sure.
there's the using the needles. Because of like my ADHD, when I'm at a conference,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
knit while the presenter's talking, and then I do a simple pattern because I'm not doing anything that requires a lot of brain power because the
Yeah,
brain
no.
power needs to go to the speaker, and then I write down like a keynote here and there. It's the only way I actually learn anything.
Sure.
Yeah. I also knitting or doodling or doing art are
Yeah.
helpful ways for me
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
And I've definitely been the person who knits in church.
Sure.
I'm also the crazy sheep lady. I've brought live lambs to church.
Nice.
Out of curiosity, did you warn anyone first, or was this just, surprise?
They're usually bottle babies that need to be fed every couple of hours when I do this.
Oh, yeah.
And I did have permission before doing it.
That's good.
Well, yeah, permission wasn't exactly what I meant, just like, by the way.
They knew that
Yeah.
during lambing season this was a
That was going to happen.
possibility.
Sure.
And usually I ended up giving children's sermon whether I wanted to or not once they realized I had the lamb.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say
that's
once you
how
have
that's
it,
gonna
like
go.
you're gonna be part of the worship service.
And
You have it,
I managed to bring a black lamb on Prodigal Son Sunday one year.
Wow. Okay.
The
That makes
pastor
sense.
rewrote the entire sermon for the second service because there was a black lamb in church. And it's just, you can't ask for
the
this.
literal black sheep of
Yeah.
the flock.
Wonderful.
That was rejected because it was black. Yeah.
Sure. Oh.
That particular mother didn't like black ewes. Don't ask me why.
Huh. Okay.
I was wondering if, because I think I had heard that sometimes when there are twins, one of them will get rejected.
Yes.
But
sometimes, why a mother rejects her baby is not always easy for us to understand. I actually had two mothers this year that said, "You want me to do what when it comes to motherhood?"
Yeah.
So I am now their children's mother.
Sure.
And then
I'm glad you were there to adopt.
Absolutely.
yes, I have 5 children of my own this year, as I
Sure.
like to put it when it comes to my bottle babies, because by the time I'm done investing all the mental and emotional effort into these things, they're my kids
yeah.
for the year.
Absolutely. Out of curiosity, do you have a favorite, like when you have to carry them to church or take them somewhere else, do you have a favorite way to carry a baby lamb? Like I once interviewed at a church with someone who brought along a bottle baby sheep to the interview because she was just in that stage, and the baby lamb was in a bucket, and I was just completely distracted the entire interview by how adorable that was.
Buckets are good. Duffel bags are good.
Sure.
Because they kind of simulate the womb when they're really young. And usually
Sure.
when I was taking them to church, it was a very young lamb, and
Yeah.
it kept them the calmest the longest. And I obviously left it open enough that the baby could breathe, but lined
Right.
it with towels, made a nice little cozy spot for the lamb to sleep in.
Aw.
That's
I kind of wish
awesome.
I had a soft-sided cat carrier. It would have been the perfect.
Oh,
Sure. Sure.
yeah, that would be awesome. So, what are your favorite things about sheep?
With the breed I have now, it's literally the rainbow of colors they come in is one of the things I love. The fact that I have almost 500 and I have that many different attitudes. I literally have a ewe who hates me.
Oh.
She doesn't trust humans to begin with, and I helped her with a difficult lambing last year, and she will never like me again.
Oh,
And
goodness. Yeah.
that's just Minka. And then there's ewes like Bindi who want to literally climb into my back pocket and live there forever.
Sure. Sure.
There is my girl Cookie, who's actually one of my personal sheep, who loves me as long as I have treats.
And if you have no treats, is done with you.
Pretty
Yep.
much. Yeah. And the whole gambit of that, I love how animals are so grateful when you feed them.
Sure.
And the fact I've had probably more profound religious experiences out in a pasture full of sheep than I've probably had in most churches.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of curiosity, the way you talk about your interaction with them, do you think that you have to be an extrovert to be a shepherd, or like does it take that kind of social energy.
Oh, I am a complete and utter introvert.
Okay.
It's just the sheep are different.
Sure.
I was wondering about that, yeah.
I don't like going off the farm. I go off the farm to go to church when life allows it,
Sure.
and maybe once in a while to get food.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah.
But if I don't go off the farm for 2 months at a time, I have no problem. Literally, when the shutdown happened with the pandemic, I looked
Mm-hmm.
around and realized my life didn't change.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you're, especially like you're outside, you're doing
yeah.
stuff, you're engaged,
Yeah.
your work is not hampered.
The main time I have to put on the I need to people is when we are at fiber shows. But I prepare
Sure.
myself for those well enough in advance that, and then, I go back to my inner sanctum of the farm.
Sure.
I like to tell people that I play an extrovert on Sunday morning.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
My like pastor version of that.
I can fake it for a while.
And then I nap.
The whole Sabbath siesta is holy, holy, holy.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, I rely heavily on my liturgical naps for sure.
I think everybody does, whether or not they are clergy or lay people.
I hope so. We need more rest in this world, not less.
Yeah.
I hope so. So, what are the most like off-base assumptions that you've heard people make about sheep?
They're stupid.
Okay.
Everybody assumes sheep are stupid, and I'm here to tell you, no. Shaun the sheep has it right. Sheep are more like Shaun than they are like most of the cartoon representations. I would not be surprised to know that my girls got in a trench coat and tried to sneak into the movie theater. Or what other hijinks they get into in the barn, and then I come in and, no, we weren't doing nothing. I totally identify as the farmer in Shaun the Sheep, because you stand there and go, whoop.
Sure.
What did you all do last night?
They sure try to pull the wool over your eyes.
Yes, yes, they did.
That was a good one.
Yes.
We're very
I've
proud.
never heard it before either.
I'm sure you have never heard that all the time.
I'm sure that's utterly unique to you, Emily.
As well as that chestnut.
So, well, I guess you've already given us one, but since we do love to make references to media and the outside world, are there any particularly awesome or terrible portrayals of shepherding that you've seen in movies, TV, or books, or something like that you'd like to call out for either being wonderful or being a total mess?
For the most part, shepherding isn't really portrayed that often. It's kind of just glossed over. You get great horse movies, you get, some decent regular farm movies, and usually they're hopeless romance movies, so you often, see people milking a bull or something like that, but, farming in general is not well represented in movies.
That's true.
It just kind of gets glossed over. I will say, like, in Babe, Ba Ram You, to your breed and fleece be true. I was in 4-H when that came through. The kids in the sheep barn hated that movie. Not from the portrayal, but because by the end of the fair week, they did not want to hear Ba Ram You.
I would imagine. Yeah, absolutely.
But there's some really good books out there, though, that use shepherding as a metaphor. A Shepherd's View of the 23rd Psalm that was written back in the 70s is really good. And he was a shepherd in eastern Kenya, I believe, and then became a pastor.
Okay.
Right.
And then there's a really cool shepherd in England who's written some really good books. But I mostly go to real shepherds who write books than...
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Yeah.
Because I get mad when things are done wrong.
Yep. As I frequently experience that when it comes to, weddings
being portrayed
in
in
fiction or
they're
those sorts
terrible.
of things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and being someone that, was born and raised in a liturgical church and they try to do a liturgy and they mess it up gets me mad as well. And I'm just the
Sure.
layperson, so.
That's
But,
fair. That's fair.
you know, Sister Monica Joan in her quote on the liturgy about the liturgy is a rope for the disarranged mind to cling to.
Yes. From
Mm.
Call the Midwife.
Hmm.
I read the books. I managed to see about 2.5 episodes before the medical gore just meant that I couldn't keep watching. But I did love the actress playing Sister Monica Jones. She was wonderful.
There has been plenty of Episcopal and non-Episcopal pastors and priests who have used her
Sure.
quotes. Yeah, when you've actually assisted in lambing and birth, the medical gore doesn't bother you as much.
No, I would imagine not.
I believe that.
I may have been known to accidentally use placenta as hair mask. There's people who pay a lot of
Oh,
money for
goodness.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
It is sold in the crunchy hair care aisle.
sure.
I usually get it there on accident. Apparently, it's good.
I mean, if we're trying to like be mindful of resources and like not have waste,
Yeah.
I mean, I usually want to wash it out of my hair, but
I probably would too.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we're kind of supposed to wash most things out of our hair at some point. So, that's fair.
yeah, well, wash that man right out of your hair too, I guess.
Yes, I don't know that musical quite well enough to actually sing that one, but I was trying to get there somehow. So,
No, but I
thank you.
just recently, I don't even remember what musical that is, but somebody was talking about that song.
South Pacific.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the main part of that entire musical I remember is that.
That and there's a song about laundry. So,
Yes, there is.
yeah.
Okay. As you were talking, I was like, yes, most pastors like don't actually care for sheep, and so we don't know like what we're doing. So we like look things up, but most of what pastors look up is stuff other pastors have written instead of stuff shepherds have written or something. It was interesting when I was in Slovakia. I spent a year in Slovakia, and sheep are actually like a pretty
They have a pretty big shepherding industry still.
yeah, and like their tourism have sheep on them. Like their touristy shirts and stuff have. I received one as a gift while I was there, and so it just had like the sheep in all the seasons and stuff. But
That
shepherding is a very different thing in Central Europe for sure.
it's part of their cultural lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
In a lot of Europe in general, shepherding was huge. And that's part of the reason in general that you see a lot of use of shepherding allegory in the Bible is because a lot of people would know and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Sure.
I mean, sheep were basically money once upon a time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you can have herds or flocks rather in areas that don't have good enough soil quality to grow like vegetable crops or grain.
Grain crops, yeah, no, they are definitely great for using more marginal land.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a part of the hierarchy of how you use land is you graze animals on land you can't till and
Sure.
That's smart. I like it.
you also will graze the animals on the fields that you do intend to till because
Poop.
poop
Free
is
fertilizer.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a giant compost pile that I keep turning all winter that then gets spread back on the pastures.
Sure.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not that great at compost. I used to have a compost pile. I was not in charge of it though.
Well, my composting for most anything goes through first it gets fed to the chickens and what the chickens don't eat gets mixed with the manure gets over to the compost pile.
Sure.
I don't do a smaller household compost because it would never get taken care of.
That's smart. Yeah. That makes sense.
There's only so much of me to go around.
Yeah. You mentioned that there's lots of biblical imagery of sheep.
Mhm.
If you so you have 500 sheep,
Yes.
but say you were only like hanging out with a fifth of them, like, I don't know, 100 sheep on a given day, and one of them wasn't there. First question, would you notice?
Yes, especially if it's my entire livelihood, which it is. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. And two, what would you do?
Seeing how I know exactly what this is going for, You do kind of leave the 99 to be on its own because the one that's missing is going to be caught in something that it shouldn't be, like the fence or a briar
Mm,
bush. And
Sure.
you go and
Okay.
seek that 90, you seek the missing sheep because it means something's happened to it. And the others are safe, you know where they are.
yeah, and they're not gonna like wander off or anything. They're
Well,
like
hopefully you
they'll
do it
stay put.
fast enough that those 100 sheep stay safe. Yeah,
Sure.
99 stay safe.
I always wondered, like,
Yeah, and
it's portrayed as this ridiculous thing to
well, the
go
thing
get the one,
is,
but
most shepherds would have been shepherding in groups, so you would have
mm,
had your buddy watch your 99
look it
sheep
up,
while you went and looked for that
Right.
the
sheep that
one.
was caught in the brambles or hopefully not eaten by a predator or.
Or caught in a ditch. There was a
Mhm.
TikTok of a sheep that like
Oh, I know this
was running and
video.
got caught in the ditch, and they like get it out and and it goes bounding off, and
Uh-huh.
2 bounds later it is back in the ditch.
Uh-huh.
Yep,
This is why you fence your animals out of things that they should not get stuck in.
that is
And
also
with
good.
any luck, the fence sometimes works.
The fence usually works.
Yeah.
Mm, that is good.
Are there any last tidbits about shepherding that you'd like to share with us?
Buy more wool.
Absolutely, of course. Our first reading for this episode is from Acts chapter 9, verses 36 through 43. Tabitha, a gifted seamstress, well known for her charity, dies of an illness. Her fellow disciples send for Peter, who is nearby, and he raises her from the dead.
So when I was reading this, obviously there's this like resurrection from the dead thing that happens. Thank you, Peter. And spoilers for those of you who have not seen the last season of The Expanse, but there's a kid in one of the like ring planets, one of the planets that are like outside the solar system, and he dies in this like accidental way, and his sister gets him healed by these creatures native to the planet. And apparently the Expanse books, like after this, like he's one of the main characters, but
They expand on it.
they do, they do expand. But this like creature that's native to the planet like heals the boy.
Hmm.
It's fascinating and creepy, and then we don't know what happens because that was the end of the season, end of the series for the TV show. But apparently he becomes a main character in the books. But yeah, that was
Okay.
I was like, resurrecting the dead. Okay, we're gonna do that thing.
So, jumping into the verses, when we read verse 39, we read, "So Peter got up and went with them, and when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them." Dorcas is the Greek name of Tabitha. And I confess, when I was originally reading this, I really wanted to make some kind of a Bewitched reference because I grew up watching Bewitched on Nick at Night,
Me
and the
too.
little girl in that show is named Tabitha. But I couldn't really like make a connection because it's not like Samantha ever spent any real time sewing on that show, so I didn't know how to.
Yeah.
Anyway, but if you do like the idea of making clothing, but you don't feel confident in your ability to try it yourself yet, personally, the Sims 4 computer game that I have recently gotten more into lets you make everything from socks to sweaters with the nifty knitting add-on. And if you have the cottage living expansion, that also allows you to farm and keep livestock such as llamas. And you can grow wool with them and then knit that wool. And with the wool, you can make little hats and scarves for your chickens, which is completely adorable. Although I have to say, I'm not really a fan of the color selection for the hats and scarves for the chickens, but they do still like it's very sweet. All the little hats look like Scottish tams. And
I
then
love knitting
the
those.
scarves are multiple colors and very cute looking. And they just look so warm and comfy in their little hats and scarves. And you can also make like these scarves for the llamas. That llamas have really long necks,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Yep.
in this game. And so the scarves that you make for the llamas sort of look like the turtleneck part of a turtleneck shirt. And they're just adorable too. So I kind of wish they'd give the llamas hats, though. I think the llamas would look better with hats. But
Llamas would look adorable with hats, I think.
Yeah, I don't know how well the actual real life llamas would put up with that, but
they would not be happy, but they do look really cute in them.
yes.
There's
Yeah.
actually
See, this is why we have computer games. So we don't have to bother real llamas and we can still make the cute things.
there's actually both at sheep shows and llama and alpaca shows something called lead line, where you dress
Okay.
both your sheep and yourself in items that you have made out of wool.
Oh my goodness.
Ooh,
That sounds fantastic.
It is.
that's awesome. Yeah, last year when I was still living in Des Moines, my friend Stephanie and I were looking for some, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, we're looking for yarn and stuff, and one of the places we went with her then 3-year-old also had llamas, and so she got to like touch the llama. She's good with animals if you can make it funny. Otherwise she gets like kind of scared. Right? So we like got her to the point of being able to like touch the llamas. We couldn't feed them because there were so many people there that had already fed them, but to like touch the softness of the llamas, and she's like, oh. It was fantastic.
I will admit that some of the best part of working through the sheep is getting to play with the wool while it's still on the sheep.
Sure.
I believe that. Okay, I read the same verse and was wondering what the colors were. And maybe, Polly, you know this of like how difficult it might be to dye things different colors. Like, were all the tunics and other clothing that Tabitha or Dorcas had made, were they like colorful? Were they probably dyed, or were they natural colors?
They would have had a fair number of natural colors available to them in this time period. One of the most prestigious colors is actually a Phoenician purple, which is from basically the area of Israel. The cochineal wouldn't be around then. That's a beetle that's actually from South America.
Right.
So that shade of red wouldn't have been available, but there's a lot of natural dyes that indigo would have been one. So beautiful shades of blue.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's different ways of making brown dyes.
Red?
There would have been something to use for red, but
Just not the one that...
just not the cochineal worm, which makes the most superior red dye. It would have been more of a rusty red color than a vibrant red color.
Okay.
Yeah.
Until about the mid-1800s, clothes were not as vibrant as they are today, and that's when we started inventing acid-based dyes. The first one was actually mauve, and it was kind of poisonous.
For us all.
That explains
There was
so
an
much.
arsenic green that
actually used arsenic.
yeah, that actually killed women.
Yeah. I mean, I think also possibly some men, but
It was very popular in women's dresses in the
mostly
Victorian
women's
era.
dresses.
Yeah.
And there were also some dyes that actually made the cloth more flammable, and therefore you were more likely to set yourself on fire, if I remember right.
Wow.
The one setting yourself on fire actually was more of an issue in the 1970s in colonial Williamsburg when they switched the costuming to this wonderful modern invention,
Polyester?
polyester.
Yeah.
Because
that's incredibly flammable.
Natural based fabrics don't actually burn, they smolder first.
Right.
So you smell your gown smoldering, they don't go in the big woof of polyester.
Right. And I was remembering wrong, actually. It wasn't the dye that made the fabric more flammable. It was what they used to clean it with, because they used to clean like certain types of fabric with actual benzene, which is, literally alcohol. And so there was a whole thing in the 1800s where women were catching on fire because they stood within 10 feet of a fireplace.
Well, I mean, if you soak yourself down in benzene, yeah.
Yeah, they figured that out eventually.
Wow. I was just like curious if they would have been able to like clothe all of the different factions in Divergent or houses in Harry Potter, but that is like
and I think the fact that so many of the dyes were so dull and then they got so bright so quickly also explains a lot about when you look at the Victorians and their taste in clothing and color and like decorating their houses. The colors are incredibly garish. like in the real world's history. They are so ugly, but that is because they've never had colors like this to play with before.
That is exactly why. It's just like the early days of Technicolor.
Yeah.
Some of the, like, Singing in the Rain and the color sequences of it,
It's so
the
odd.
musical numbers, some of the suits they're wearing, the bright yellow suit, it's like, oh my god!
Why would you do that to yourself? Yeah. Especially in that the more futuristic dance sequence that happens toward the like middle of the end, where he's dancing with himself on Broadway to like in some kind of a dream-like sequence, and the colors in that are just horrific. And to us, I mean, to them, it was all very exciting and pretty because they finally had color movies. Yeah.
It actually reminds me of the conversation, Kay, you and I had for our Lent 5 episode this year, when we were talking about church abundance versus church extravagance.
Yeah.
And the
murals in the churches,
the murals
in
and
the
stuff
medieval
in
times.
churches, when they've been it's not refurbished. When they've been restored to their actual original colors, people nowadays get really upset about it because they are so garish in their colors.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when it's actually the only way you can see a Bible story.
Right.
It's and frankly, I don't think they're that, bad when I see the redone versions. And places like Notre Dame used to be painted outside.
Yeah.
In beautiful colors.
Yeah.
But, acid rain did away with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Weird how that works.
It's also why we actually now have to start actually using sulfur fertilizer again. We didn't have to when acid rain was a big thing. It was free from the air.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The weird things you wind up being grateful for when you learn about science.
Yeah.
Yep. Our next reading, we're doing the Psalm this episode because it is Psalm 23, which is a very well-known and much beloved psalm. So we figured...
It's literally my favorite verses in the Bible.
Yes, I am so excited because Psalm 23 praises God's shepherding care of humanity. And I am not surprised that you as a shepherd would resonate with this. What do you love about it?
Both as the shepherd and as the sheep, I relate to it completely. Because, like the whole staff and rod, sometimes when we're caring for our animals, we do things they don't necessarily like medicine.
Yeah. My cat has been sick for the last couple of weeks, and she's not real thrilled with me, but she's alive.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And, the providing you with green pastures and still waters. I mean, I have had enough blessings in my life that you don't always see them right away as green pastures and still waters, but
sure,
they are.
Yeah. Well, and I think about the sheep that you said hates people and hates you because you actually kept that sheep and
her 2 ewes alive.
And the 2 ewes alive, but it was really hard, and so she doesn't have all of the connections to make. She just knows that was really hard and painful, and you were there.
And
which is hard for you, but...
And the second part about, yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. I mean, you don't go through life without hitting rough patches and, knowing that your shepherd is there with you.
Sure.
Is definitely comforting. Yeah. And then I like food, so, preparing a food bounty, always good.
Absolutely.
I had a beautifully illustrated version of this as a little kid.
I did too.
It was basically oil painted, and it was one of my favorite books. And at the time, we didn't have sheep, but I could relate to it as how my grandma took care of the cows.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. That's a beautiful... I also love that imagery of, God as your grandmother taking care of cows.
To me, this is how I was able to relate to God from the tiniest age. And I understand how much of a hit the nail on the head it makes me type person, but it always speaks to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes stereotypes are, accurate for a reason. They exist in the first place for good reason. Yeah.
I may own bib overalls and a flannel shirt, yes.
Oh, I definitely own bib overalls and a flannel shirt. for other reasons.
And I have the three-tined pitchfork, too. I mean, you know, I can look like both characters in American Gothic, actually.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I smile a little more.
Overrated. Smiling is overrated.
Yeah.
When I was reading it, I was thinking about shepherding. I was thinking about the Black Panther as like a model for a shepherd of people, which is a little bit ironic because, you know, panthers not exactly vegetarian.
But neither are shepherds, okay?
Right.
We are sheep.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ideally, Black Panther is not actually eating the people of Wakanda, but I do like the way the Black Panther, in the movies at least, like cares for and is very clear about protecting the people of Wakanda from outside forces that might harm them. And
yes,
sometimes like they don't agree and there's conflict about like how to best do it, but there's always like King T'Challa's main goal is always protecting his people and his land and his community.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. And not just because I'm a huge Marvel fan.
That helps, though.
Yeah. And then when we reach the verses, reading verse 4, we read, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." And when I was looking for a connection for that verse, it immediately came to me that I'm sure that the Fellowship were greatly comforted by Gandalf having his staff when they were wandering around traveling together. I would want Gandalf to have his staff if I was traveling with Gandalf.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure that he's not entirely powerless without it, but still, like, when in doubt, give Gandalf all the accessories he needs, by all means.
I mean, that's... You shall not pass to the predator. Totally.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's why Wormtongue wanted the staff taken away, right? Take away all the weapons and the staff.
Yep. The non-allegory allegory.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Tolkien. It is a total allegory. I don't care if you meant it to be a history.
Oh, it's all... Yeah.
Yeah.
Tolkien is full of allegory.
It's not quite as pointed as Aslan from C.S. Lewis, but it's right up there.
It's up there. It's pretty high.
That's because he wasn't C.S. Lewis wasn't trying to hide it.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, no, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe remains the only book I've ever literally thrown across a room. I was 9, and I thought that the line between paying homage and like just straight up copying had been crossed, and. And I was a little frustrated with this guy because this book had been praised to the skies to me, and I was told it was wonderful, and I knew that this guy had just committed outright plagiarism from the Bible, which, like, terrible source choice, dude. A lot of people have read this. And
I still wish I could go sit at the pub with those two gentlemen, though.
Yeah.
It would be fascinating. I mean, I don't know how much they would, like, respectfully converse with any of us, but it would be fascinating.
I'd happily do the fly in the wall thing. They don't have to know I'm there. I'm just listening.
We could sit in the next booth over and just listen.
Yes. Perfect.
And actually, they weren't too bad for their time period and all of that.
Yeah. That's not...
They made an effort. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was reading verse 5, we read, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." And I really love this part because the oil, right, as a white person with particularly white hair, even like curly and thick hair, I don't use oil a lot on my hair, but I have like, I also don't use shampoo and conditioner in the same way that a lot of white people do, but oil actually is something that is intended to maintain hair.
Yeah.
Especially if it's kinky or black hairstyles. And so this was just like a fun reminder for me of hashtag only Romans are white. The only characters in the Bible that we encounter that are white are the Romans.
And probably not all of them.
Yeah.
Well, considering Paul is a Roman citizen and he's Jewish.
Yeah. Yes.
And it was also anointing the head with oil is how the Jewish kings were crowned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also it is a biblical accurate way for treating parasites in sheep.
I was gonna say...
Yes.
The, like, sheep cheese, right? The
Yes.
oil
Yes.
and sheep. When you said that earlier in the deep dive, I was like, oh, we're gonna get to this. There's oil. Yeah.
There, and this time of year, I see the whole, it comes around on Facebook again about how oil is used on sheep is this and that. And it's like, there was so much built into the context of the anointing the head with oil
Mm-hmm.
that it
Sure.
goes beyond these little blurbs you see on Facebook. It doesn't annoy me as much as the mama who lost her babies and then another ewe had babies and she gave her lamb. I'm like, no, 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 no. She did not give her lamb to the other mother. The other mother stole the baby. That was not
Ooh.
generosity. That was thieving.
That was like Solomon and the women.
Yeah, no,
Solomon and the
it
two
is
women.
more cut the baby in half type stuff than the
Sure.
one you being generous. But they try to make it into this beautiful biblical God watches out type thing. And it's like, you really don't understand sheep. You're claiming you not understand your sheep, but actually it's someone's in-law who writes this. It's a pretty story and they make it beautiful, but you're trying to put way too much of a spin on this
Right.
that you
Mm-hmm.
stole that lamb.
Yeah.
And I've
Like sheep may be wonderful, but they're not people.
yeah, I do not anthropomorphize the sheep too much, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
I'm not gonna say sheep don't have emotions, but they don't feel them like we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I have a ewe who hates me.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Our New Testament reading for this episode is from Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 through 17. The author witnesses a numberless crowd of people surrounding and worshiping God and is told who they are.
So basically, it's like the United Nations, but for Christians.
I mean, they are in one place. I suppose we're not actually. The one thing they seem to agree on is that God is awesome. We're not told that they agree on anything else, so that seems reasonably accurate.
I mean, you get all the denominations in one room. Yeah, that's about right.
Ooh, so it could just be like the World Council of Churches, basically.
Yeah.
I've been there.
I have not.
Yeah, the one time I've been out of the country. It's a very interesting building to just walk the hallways in because you bump into all sorts of people. So
I believe that.
I definitely would believe that.
and there was a very sweet cat who lived just outside the building who really liked me. So that also made
Oh,
my
of course.
time there much better. But
Of course they did.
You sound like me when I went to Australia, and the highlights of my trip were going into a shearing barn, my cousin's dairy, and horseback riding in the mountains outside of Cairns.
sure.
That
Exactly.
sounds lovely.
Oh, wait, I forgot swimming in the Great Barrier Reef.
Wow.
Ooh.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd be good with that.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty lovely. Yeah. So then as we dive into the verses, in verse 10 we read, "They cried out in a loud voice, saying, 'Salvation belongs to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb.'" And it got me thinking, okay, but what does salvation look like to a lamb? So, Polly, I'm curious for your insights, because the best I could come up with was vegetarianism is probably a version of salvation for lambs, because then they're not going to get eaten.
You see, they don't think that far ahead.
Fair.
Salvation to them is, I left the grain bucket unattended. Or fresh grain poured, a new pasture. Yeah.
Sure.
They're very simple creatures when it comes to something like that. Feed them and they're happy.
I've known a few people like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then in the second half of verse 14, we read, "Then he said to me, 'These are they who have come out of the great ordeal. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb.'" I would hope that all of our listeners would already know this, but this is not how laundry works, people.
I hate that song, by the way.
Yeah,
Washed in the
I
blood
was
of the
not
Lamb.
really raised with that song. I encountered it as a teenager and found it deeply weird.
I knew it from camp, I think.
Sure.
I grew up in a church where they had a fit about the new hymnal coming out in 1985. I'm pretty sure they had the
Sure.
black hymnal before that, okay?
All right.
Sure.
Yep.
But they also were all very active in Christian endeavors. So I know all of the old Christian Endeavor gospel songs.
Sure.
And
Sure.
Are You Washed in the Blood is one of those.
And, like, don't get me wrong, they're incredibly singable and catchy, and they stick with you and all that. But also, some of the imagery is not what I'm used to. So,
yeah. When We All Get to Heaven's a much better Christian Endeavor song to sing.
I think we could do that.
So, just in case anyone listening to this is not, familiar with how to do your own laundry, please do not try to get your whites white by using blood. That is just going to lead to incredibly awkward questions and misery. No. Don't go there. Now, if you are, for some reason in your life, maybe you've been lambing, maybe something else is going on, maybe there was a terrible accident that totally wasn't your fault.
Maybe you menstruate.
Maybe you own a uterus.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, I'm not here to judge. Although, again, this does seem like a very appropriate moment to mention that, by the way, murder is bad. Don't murder. But I feel like I say that a lot on this podcast. But also, like, this seems applicable. But if you do ever find yourself needing to get bloodstains out of clothing, Teen Vogue recently had a very good article on a number of ways to do that, and also actually ranked them in terms of what you start with and where you go after that, which is super useful, because some of these ways, if you try them first, that's going to make it so much worse for you later when they don't work. So we can link to the Teen Vogue article, and it has a number of different options for you.
Cold water is very good.
Yeah, that's basically where you start, and then you move on from there.
I love it. And then our gospel reading for this episode is John chapter 10, verses 22 through 30. Before the crucifixion, Jesus, when questioned in the temple, promises his sheep everlasting life, and that they will never be separated. This is one of many. Every year we have a Good Shepherd Sunday, and every year we have Psalm 23 and a gospel reading where Jesus identifies as a shepherd or a gate or any number of things. And this one takes place during Hanukkah. They say John calls it the Festival of the Dedication, which is also called Hanukkah. So it usually happens in December, sometimes a little bit in November, and sometimes a little bit in January. But it reminded me of the Rugrats Hanukkah special, which
I'm just thinking latkes, so
right. I mean,
I am always here for potatoes, absolutely.
Yeah, in my Hebrew class for our final, we went over to our Hebrew professor's house and watched the Rugrats Hanukkah special and ate spaghetti or something. So I always just have a loving place in my heart for that particular special and the way that the Maccababies keep things lit, keep the fire going.
I've actually never seen that, but I didn't have Nickelodeon when that came out.
It's adorable. I liked the Rugrats growing up. Friend of the podcast, Pace Warfield May, and I did an Advent movie calendar that went from Advent through. We were a little late getting started, so it started December 1st, but went through Epiphany, and we had on one of the days of Hanukkah, we had to watch something that is from a non-Christian religion, and so we watched the Rugrats Hanukkah special. It's delightful and it's short. Yeah, cute.
And when we get into the verses, in verse 23, we read, "And Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon." Now, I don't know about you guys, but portico is not exactly a word I grew up using. I suppose my uncle is an architect, so I could have learned it at an early age, but he lived on the other side of the country, so that didn't really happen. So, for those of you who are wondering what a portico is, I looked it up for you. It is a roof supported by columns at regular intervals underneath. And I hate to tell you guys this, but the Midwest already has a term for this. This is called a pole barn. And so basically what we're talking about here is Jesus is walking around Solomon's pole barn, which sounds a little less biblical and epic and a little less poetical, but it's also that is literally what a pole barn is. I don't know.
And now I'm just picturing it filled with sheep, because that's where I go when I think of pole barn. Yeah.
See, I think of pole barns and I think of either church picnics or or like church camp. And so, goodness knows, sheep trying to go through the various events at a church camp would be plenty of chaos.
For me, the pole barns were always where the sheep were kept at the county
Yeah,
fair. So,
sure,
For me,
sure.
I grew up in Colorado, so I don't know this pole barn of which you speak, but I did learn about porticos. So
Yeah,
my dad
yeah.
is an engineer.
Okay. See they mean the exact same thing. It's just a pole barn will often have like a shed on one end of it so that you have a place to store stuff out of the rain, but it doesn't have to. But I just am deeply amused by retranslating this as Solomon's pole barn. Uh,
I will never think of it as anything else now. Thank you.
I don't know that it would be appropriate for the Cotton Patch Gospels translation of the Gospels, because I don't know if that's also a term used down south or not. But it did occur to me, and also like this makes this whole thing sound a little more like a Reba McEntire song than the traditional church hymn that you usually think of when you hear the word portico, or at least for me. But like also that song should exist. Like Reba McEntire could totally pull off a song about Jesus and Solomon's pole barn. I'm up for that. Why does it not
There's a
exist
couple
already?
of other country singers who can
Yeah,
do it too.
sure,
George Strait could do a good one as well.
absolutely.
And then in verse 27, Jesus says, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me." And I immediately thought of my mom and my aunt for this one. I can usually tell their voices apart, but every once in a while, like my mom's voice that she uses when she answers the phone or on her voicemail sounds exactly like my aunt. And like my roommate and her sister sound exactly the same, to the extent that like Google Voice doesn't always recognize who's speaking.
Interesting.
Well, let me put it this way. The sheep shall know the voice of the shepherd. They shall know the sound of her footsteps. They shall know the sound of her car door and her car engine.
So you mean we probably won't mix up Jesus and
No.
Jesus' brother James?
No. I used to live off farm from another farm I used to manage. And yes, the sheep knew when I pulled on farm. If I used somebody else's vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't until I opened my mouth. And yeah.
Sure.
Huh.
And
I have heard that, yeah.
sheep actually can recognize up to 150 different faces, both human and animal.
Wow.
Okay.
So they might not know everybody in their flock, but they will know the one who gives them the food.
Well, I mean, they actually recognize everybody in their flock, but this is like they will remember these faces that they've been shown 6 months later.
Oh, wow.
Ooh,
Okay.
wow.
Yeah, and that's just what the study could prove. I'm sure it's actually more than that.
Yeah. See, I think it's interesting that you say, Emily, that siblings sound the same, because in my family, all the siblings sound very different from each other, but what happens is that you wind up sounding like one of your parents.
Oh. See,
Because, like, I sound like my mom on a regular basis, and that still freaks out my husband. And, like, he usually finds it amusing, that's fine.
I may open my mouth and any number of family members seem to jump out, so
Polly, did you have particular things that you like about this passage? I know you really like the psalm, but
I do like all the stuff in the Gospel of John that refers to Jesus as a shepherd. Like, there isn't much I don't like in it. It's
makes sense.
pretty much a few of the Isaiah passages sometimes creep me out that refer to they get a little weird, but I mean,
Sure.
and then the sheep and the goats. That one I can't stand.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I'm curious. So this one has the verse right after the one that I just read. Verse 28 says, "I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand." So obviously, shepherds don't give their sheep eternal life. They will perish because they will probably be eaten, maybe by their own shepherd. But I am curious about the other piece of that, the "no one will snatch them out of my hand." And other Good Shepherd Sundays kind of go more into like predatory animals trying to eat the sheep, or or people trying to rob them. But
I will tell you this: you try to hurt my babies, you better run.
Sure.
And I any other shepherd I know, and it's not just because our livelihoods are based on them. We do this because we're passionate about caring for the animals.
Yeah.
And you don't care for animals if you don't like them. Or I should say, most people who farm animals do it because they have a passion for it. Like anything, there's always a bad apple here and there.
Yeah.
But all of us, I mean, we can go out there and, any shepherd I know will go out there and go, oh, this is Bindi and she has blah 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 traits, and this is her, and that's her daughter, and that's her granddaughter, and there's her granddad, and like literally we can go out in the field and do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's just, and it's human or predator, and we feed the animals and we take care of them and we're with them. I'm lucky because I do work for somebody else. I get vacation, but most farmers don't typically get a lot of vacation.
You have to find someone to look after the animals, and finding someone you trust to do that properly is a whole separate thing.
Yeah, there's a whole scripture about the hired hand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't there several?
I mean, yeah. But
yeah, I think so.
If we were in a different year, we would have read it.
Yeah. And I also take this as part of stewarding the earth is caring for the animals. We use the animals to care for the land, and the land to care for the animals. It's the circle of life.
To bring up another musical.
Yes.
Yes.
So, now for our newest segment, Let's Make a Muppets Musical. During this part of the podcast, we talk about the readings that we've looked at and how would we cast them if they were being played by Muppets with the occasional token human. Polly, would you like to start us off by your thoughts about casting these as Muppets?
So I was kind of thinking the Revelations reading, and mixing a little of The Simpsons in there, where we basically just see God from the waist down, and that's human. And the only other human would be our good friend John, who wrote it, and everybody else is a Muppet.
I could see that. Absolutely.
I think it even adds even more to John of Patmos may have been taking psychedelic drugs while writing Revelation.
We did talk about that in our Easter 2 episode. I mentioned it because we did a deep dive into Revelation, so yeah.
Yep.
And then I can also see, like, for the 23rd Psalm, Gonzo and his chickens.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Gonzo loves his chickens.
Just dress him up like a Middle Eastern biblical time shepherd, and
I don't know that I want to give Gonzo a staff. I'm not sure that would work out too well.
He'd hurt himself. Yeah. I mean, he does have the hook.
Yeah, he'd wind up bapping himself in the nose.
Yeah.
Like, he can have the outfit. I don't know that he can walk properly in sandals. He might fall over, but he could certainly have the robe at least.
So. Yeah, he would do well in the robe, I think.
That would be fine.
Yeah. It's
not too complicated.
I was thinking of it, and I actually didn't think of a Muppet, but I thought of Lamb Chop.
Which is pretty close.
Sock puppet thing.
I will not start
Sherry
singing the song, I promise.
I haven't heard it in forever. My sibling had a Lammykins, I think is what we call the stuffed animal pet.
I'm pretty sure every farm at some point ends up with a weather named Lamb Chop.
Of course.
Yeah, makes sense.
And sometimes it's Sir Lamb Chomp of whatever, and
Sure.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the axe reading and Tabitha, and like what kind of Muppet would make a good seamstress. And when it comes to that, I was trying to focus on how, like, when you think about biblical seamstresses, they're not using sewing machines because those hadn't been invented yet. So they're doing hand sewing, which means that you have to have, like, a fair amount of, like, dexterity for your fingers. And you know how there are a few Muppets that have those very long, very thin fingers that have sort of floppy ends? And I was sort of trying to picture a Muppet hand doing hand sewing with those Muppet fingers. And I'm not exactly sure which Muppet it would be, but, like, that would be... You know it would wind up being set to music somehow.
The female from the hippie band.
Janice. We have cast Janice as many characters.
I was going to say,
I never remember her name.
Two most common.
With the fantastic hair. I think everyone loves her hair.
I could see Miss Piggy showing off the garments.
I was going to say, Miss Piggy would be one of the mourners, for sure.
Mostly
Oh,
because she
absolutely.
couldn't get her new dress.
But boy, she would love talking about what it was going to look like.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And, since you're doing Muppets, you could bring any of the Sesame Street Muppets into it, too.
It's true. We do sometimes
Yes.
because I'm more familiar with Sesame Street than other ones. But
Yeah. I believe Oscar the Grouch made an appearance last week.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's true because Oscar the Grouch is great.
Of course.
Actually, it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think so.
He's my favorite Sesame Street character. I
I
identify as
used to have a stuffed Oscar the Grouch. We had a
Aw.
stuffed Oscar the Grouch and a stuffed Tweety Bird growing up.
Aw.
So, Polly, any other thoughts on life, the universe, and everything?
Bring your towel and 42. Pretty much, try to support your local farmers wherever you are, whether it's going to farmers markets or certain grocery stores have buy local options. Farmers need as much support as they can get across the entire gambit of the agricultural industry.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
We are less than 2% of the American public, but we grow all of the food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You need a lawyer at least once in your life. You need a banker a couple times. You need a farmer 3 times a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
That's
I'm working on a TikTok page,
Ooh.
Farmer Polly, and it features a lot of the sheep and me and day-to-day farm life.
Awesome.
Nice. And we will link to that for folks in the episode description. We'll make sure we link to you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Polly. We are so glad to have had you with us.
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed it.
Wonderful. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. Catch us next time when we'll discuss nerdery connections to the scripture readings for the 5th Sunday of Easter. This podcast has been produced by us, Kay Rohloff and Emily Ewing. For more fun, check us out on Twitter and Facebook at Nerds at Church, or contact us at nerdsatchurch@gmail.com.
Also, if you like what you've heard, rate us or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, or wherever you catch your podcasts. If you want access to our uncut guest episodes and interviews, live Q&As, and more, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/nerdsatchurch. I'm guessing it's probably about as much as your next skein of yarn from your local yarn shop.
Very possibly.
Or maybe less.
Less.
I know. I was trying to give him the best. I know. I was like, I'm trying to give him the benefit of it's probably less. Less than your next skein of yarn.
Also, let us know on Facebook or Twitter who you would cast for the Let's Make a Muppets musical for this episode.
As the ancient Christian said,
Pax
Pax
Vobiscum.
Vobiscum.